This is TWiT.
Steve Jobs must be turning over in his grave. Apple and longtime arch rival IBM announced a broad partnership yesterday to make Apple's iOS a bona fide enterprise platform, and making IBM, of all things, a reseller of iPhones and iPads. Devendra Hardawar is a senior editor and the lead mobile writer for VentureBeat, and Maribel Lopez is the founder of Lopez Research, and she wrote about this story for Forbes. You're on the screen, so we'll start with you, Maribel. Can you tell us more about what IBM and Apple are planning to do together?
Yeah, I think it originally came out as Apple and IBM putting lots of apps onto phones, but really what they're trying to do is take IBM's enterprise expertise, marry it with great Apple devices, and allow us to finally get good mobile enterprise apps on phones. And they're going to do that by basically working closely with Apple and trying to make it so that developers can get all the management and security and all those icky enterprise features they need to work.
Now, of course, Apple dominates the enterprise in terms of actual usage of phones. I believe that 73% of tablets in use in U.S. corporations are iPads, 82% of smartphones are iPhones, and that, I believe, is according to IDC. Why do they need bona fide enterprise applications if they're already so dominant? I mean, is that even necessary?
So if you're asking me my opinion
I
on
am,
it,
yes.
Yeah, we have very few real enterprise mobile apps. We're just at the very tip of the surface. And what we really need to do is create those next generation of enterprise mobile apps that are contextual, adaptive, dig deep into the device, are really meant to work on that device and not a PC. So I'd say we have very few of them today. And the other thing that I think is important is, if you look globally, Samsung's starting to do a really good job and enterprises were starting to take notice. So I think Apple wants to basically secure its foothold in the North American market and also make sure that it doesn't lose out in the international space. And one way of doing that is to make sure that businesses can use their tools the most effectively.
So does this lessen support by IBM for other platforms while this is all happening? Like, what about Android?
Oh, can you take that, Devendra?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really interesting question because Android right now it has some sort of foothold in the enterprise. I think Samsung has done some really smart work there with their Knox security. But like everything with Android, the enterprise support is really fragmented. So it's unclear what businesses will be doing in terms of enterprise. I think for IBM, it doesn't make sense for them to give up on enterprise entirely, but it does make a lot of sense for them to focus on where those users actually are, and that's with iOS devices at this point. It'll be really interesting to see what Google, Samsung, everybody does, and Microsoft, which has always been a strong enterprise company, but definitely not in mobile. This is sort of like the gauntlet being thrown down.
Now, Devendra, Apple CEO Tim Cook told a reporter that, quote, if you were building a puzzle, IBM and Apple would fit nicely together with no overlap. We don't compete on anything. And, this has always been the case. What is changed now? I mean, these two companies have been at each other's throughout. Apple's been very anti-IBM for, what, decades?
Yeah.
And suddenly they're the perfect partners. What changed?
It's kind of hilarious. I mean, there's a lot of history here. I don't know. It makes me feel a little old because I'm aware of the 80s Apple versus IBM history. But the youngins today may not even understand what IBM used to do or what it used to mean to go against Apple. So what changed, I think, is the fact that Apple now, maybe it's because of Tim Cook, because he's just a very pragmatic personality. But Apple now as a company is just doing things that are very pragmatic, maybe not as far-reaching and visionary as people would like, but it makes sense because I think Apple kind of iOS devices got into businesses because they were the best devices at the time, but they never really had the full support that a lot of businesses need in terms of deployment and actually getting people's hands on those devices, and in terms of getting software support out there either. Apple is a consumer consumer hardware company. So I think it's a clear sign that they just needed help, and IBM seemed to be a great partner because they needed help too in terms of distribution.
Now, Maribel Lopez, it's easy to announce a partnership like this, but they're planning some real activities. When do we expect to see some actual products or services coming out of this?
Yeah, we're expecting in the fall timeframe. I mean, basically, IBM has been working on Apple apps for some time as part of their global business services, and they already have some things in the works, but I think you'll start to see meaningful deployment that leverages the iOS 8 and the 4,000 APIs that they opened up starting in the fall timeframe.
All right, fantastic. Well, Devindra Hardawar is at venturebeat.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Devindra. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Maribel Lopez is at lopezresearch.com, and you can find her on Twitter at surprise, surprise, Maribel Lopez. Thank you so much for joining us on Tech News Today.
Thank you.